Hello.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. We are live. Good evening to all of our audience. My name is Seisha. I'm the social media manager here at Charis Books and More, which is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore, and also of Charis Circle, which is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. And tonight we are so excited to host Alishia McCullough in conversation with Dr. Mahogany Hall for the launch of Alicia's new book, Reclaiming the Black Body, Nourishing the Home Within, which is an essential exploration of the overlooked impact of disorder among Black women and a prescriptive roadmap to returning to wholeness within our bodies. Let me first introduce our incredible conversation partner tonight, Dr. Mahogany Hall. Dr. Hall has acquired over 21 years of professional experience assisting clients with individual, couples, and family challenges. She is licensed in the DC metro area and provides coaching and consulting nationwide. She's the founder and CEO of Hall Counseling Services, which is a medical group practice most known for its diverse team of clinicians. And the focus of Dr. Hall's clinical, academic, and consulting work is the impact of racism on mental health, human relationships, and professional careers. To address such issues, she co developed a psychotherapy and race based yoga program called Healing the Whole. Her work has been featured in Black Girl Nerds, Earn Your Leisure, and I Am CEO podcast. Dr. Hall has created mental health webinars and spoken at various events, including those at universities, community retreats, and professional organizations. Most recently, she was a speaker at InvestFest 2024, an event in Atlanta, Georgia, hosted by Earn Your Leisure and Steve Harvey. That's very cool. She also works extensively with politicians and individuals and families in the entertainment industries. Everyone give a warm welcome to Dr. Hall. And of course, it is my honor to introduce Alishia McCullough, who is our woman of the hour, our author, but who is also a licensed clinical mental health therapist and a founder of Black and Embodied Counseling and Consulting, PLLC. She specializes in somatic therapy, trauma healing, and eating disorder treatment with a focus on cultivating embodiment and fostering liberation. Alishia also runs a self-paced online course for Reimagining Eating Disorders 101. And of course, we are so excited to have these two community workers here with us tonight. Before I pass it on to Dr. Hall to get the event started and to begin the conversation, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping things. I want to remind our audience to leave questions, comments, and of course, lots and lots of love for our authors in the chat box. There's going to be a Q&A session towards the end, so if you have any questions for Alishia or for Dr. Hall, please leave them so they can answer them. And of course, I wanted to remind everyone that buying your book from Charis allows us to keep putting on events like this. So if you want to buy Reclaiming the Black Body after hearing about it tonight, you can click on that teal link right below us where it says Reclaiming the Black Body, Nourishing the Home Within. And it'll take you to a link on our website where you can purchase from us and directly support our work. So I'm going to head out now and allow these two incredible ladies to get the conversation started.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stacia. We appreciate that. Great introductions. So here we are. So I wanted to start by saying that I am absolutely honored to be able to have this conversation with you about this wonderful body of work that you've created and you've worked so hard on. I'm clapping it up for you on the outside and the inside. I'm always smiling about the work that you do. So my first question for you, there are people who are currently joining us and they may be familiar with your work. Possibly they have already purchased the book, but maybe also they don't have it just yet and they have questions about it or they have an interest in the topic. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell us what is your book about and who exactly is it for? Who is your audience?
Absolutely. One, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for being in conversation with me about this book. I really appreciate you. Thank you for everyone who has joined in on this session and for Charis Books for hosting us tonight. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm so looking forward to this discussion. And just to transition over into talking about a little bit about what is this book? So this book was a collection of experiences that came to me from exploring my own identity as a Black woman. I realized there were so many things in our community that we were experiencing, whether it was colorism, racism, texturism, fat phobia, troubles with our eating. I noticed that those things were plaguing our community, but we did not have a space. We did not have the research. We did not even have like the knowing to like come to therapy and say, this is what I'm experiencing, because that wasn't normalized. And so what I wanted to do is really offer a space to give us voice, and also offer us a space to really take our time to come back to our bodies and heal. And so a part of the healing for me looked like, okay, first let's address, what is the problem? Where did it start? Where did it come from? So let's get to the root of it, and let's do the deeper work of uprooting the issue and then moving into the process of healing. And so that is what this book is about. This book is about, how do we look at the things that keep us from feeling free? How do we look at the things that keep us from experiencing the healing that we're deserving of? And then start to work through those things. And together we're like moving through the weeds and then pulling them up out of the ground. But we're also saying, we're not just pulling these weeds up. We're not just getting to the root and just taking it out and not replacing it with something new. We're replacing it with the healing that's also being offered through this book. And so for me, it's everything from talking about issues of, how did our relationship with food get disrupted? It's talking about things like, how does patriarchy impact our bodies as Black women and femmes? How do topics such as fat phobia impact our bodies as Black women and femmes? And so really getting into some really tough topics and starting to unpack those and taking our time with them. And I, throughout the book, am almost like a conversation partner of like, okay, I'm here with you. It's okay. We can just like slow it down. How does this show up in your body? And so really taking that time to meet us in a space of kindness, of gentleness, but also in a space of like, let's be real, right? Like, let's be real and look at what's happening so that we can get to the things that we say we want. And so that's what this book is about, is getting into the roots of that. And then who is this book for? It's for Black women and femmes. Like, I wrote this book for us, with us in mind. And I will name that since this book has come out, I've had people of all communities, backgrounds, races, read this book and say, wow, I have been impacted tremendously by reading this book. And I say, and I go back to a quote that I've heard so many times, which is, when Black women and femmes, the people who are the most marginalized in our community, are free, we are all free. And so I wrote this book for us, but I know this book is about really liberating the collective and changing the world one person at a time.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I love that. Love that, love that. And I appreciate that you mentioned that your book is for you have a very specific audience, but there are other people outside of your targeted audience who have appreciation for the book, for the work, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. That's very important. So the next question that I have for you is centered around the topic of um, so this book. Let me start by saying your book is obviously about eating disorders and the body of Black women, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are other books that have similar topics, right? So there, I could go into the bookstore and I may be able to find, I don't know, let's say 50 books that are about eating disorders, right? But what makes your book different from some of those others that are discussing a similar topic?
Yeah. So you're right. You can go into the store and find books about eating disorders. And what I'll name is that, because we're just now having these conversations about eating disorders in Black communities, and the books that I have read have been mostly research focused, treatment centered focus, whereas this book is to meet people, whether you're a clinician or someone who's just dealing with issues with food or wanting to establish a better relationship with your body. This book is about meeting everyone where they are. And so it's not like you have to like be a PhD student or having like worked in some academia in order for you to understand the content. This content can meet you where you are in this exact moment. Whether, for example, you were in Target and you were like, I don't like the way these clothes fit on my body. This book is for that, right? Whether you're at a restaurant with your friends and everybody's awkward and talking about dieting, this book is for that. Whether you're with your family and hearing negative comments about your body, this book is for that. And so it really meets us in a lot of different ways. And I also want to say it's very guided. And so there's an experience of throughout the book, I weave in somatic practices. And so for folks who might not have heard of that word somatic practice before, somatics is a relationship that you have being connected to your body. So your body's being connected from a brain, from your full body, your heart, your womb. Everything about your body is online. You're connected to it, you're listening to it, and then you're attuning and saying, okay, for example, maybe I'm hungry. What does my body want right now? Maybe it's, I don't want to, eat a piece of cake. Maybe it's something else. But there's this deeper attunement to like, what is it actually that my body needs from me? Sometimes it's not even food. Maybe it's like, I really need a hug right now. And so it's really getting into the clarity of like, what are the messages that our bodies are giving us? And then listening to that and giving it what it needs. And so that's a part of the somatic practices of slowing down and getting into our body that I offer throughout the book. And then I also offer an opportunity for us to journal. And so for everybody, maybe the somatic practice isn't, you might not be there for that. You might not feel like doing that, during the day. And that's real. And so what I offer is also journal practices for you to take your time, get a journal or a piece of paper, whatever works for you. And I offer many different modalities of like, if you don't want to write, color. If you don't want to do this, I give a lot of different options. And so that's another accessible mode of processing what you're experiencing throughout the book, that makes it different. And then I just want to add to and say, outside of those factors that also make this book different, is that it's also a call to accountability. It's a call to a conversation directly with Black women and femmes around, here are the issues that we're having in our community. How do we really take a deeper look at them and say, we want to change. We want to change. What are the things that we need to do to change? And it's not that I'm telling you what to do, because I'd never claim to be the expert of an experience. What I am is offering different options and saying, in this option, I want you to decide, what works for you. And if none of these work for you, I'm also going to support you with co-creating something different that does. And so that's another opportunity, is that no one is cast out, no one is rejected. It's an opportunity for all of us to come together and get what we need.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So, and I think what you just said will transition us perfectly into the next question, because you are, speaking about the experience of Black women, which is a very unique experience, right? So, there is no other like it, whether good or bad, right? It's a very specific experience, and so with that, I think that we still have a lot of people in our country, maybe even, I would venture to say in our world, who are just realizing, some of them still may not know, but they're just realizing some of the issues that we have, as Black women, and particularly in this country. So, what are some of the challenges that you think people could have with perceiving your work, right, and exploring these topics and being able to sit with themselves? So
Yeah.
people who, may not be Black women, anyone outside of this targeted group.
hmm So I'll answer that in two ways. One for our community and one for folks that are, not in the community as well. And so one of the things I think about is that for some people, we are just now waking up to the issues that are happening. Maybe we felt something that was off, but we didn't have the language for it. But in this moment, there's no, opportunity for us to say, hey, like this, like racism doesn't exist or misogyny or doesn't exist, because we see it all around us, right? And so for some people, they're in those earlier stages of just coming to awareness and consciousness around what is occurring. And for those folks, what I say is that in that, what can happen is that we focus mostly on, oh my God, all these things are happening, all the problems, all these, this trauma, that trauma. And so what I do, and when we talk about addressing the root, is that I do name, like those things, and also lead us historically into where did those come from? Because I think we have to know where we've been to know where we're going. So that was really important for me in writing this book, is to explore the history of what is the origin of this. And then as we explore the origin, leading us into the healing. And so what I anticipate could happen for some folks is that there can be this inclination to get stuck in that more like the trauma, the story, all the bad things that have occurred, even the good things that have occurred, getting stuck in like all of that. And I say like that phase is valid too. And so there's a reason why, this is a book that I encourage people to continue to return back to, because maybe for them, their nervous system at that point is like, this is all I can hold is this information. And as they progress and you move forward, then it's like, okay, I'm ready to move more into like, what's the next step? Besides just doing the trauma dumping, what's the next phase of this process and this journey? And so then I think they can pick it back up again and see, okay, now that we've talked about that, let's talk about how we plant in new seeds so that we can grow new plants and create more, abundance, in our communities, in our lives. And that's there for them when they're ready for it. And so that is a challenge that I could see some folks experiencing. Is getting a little stuck in some places, but I also meet challenge with as an opportunity to explore the body and say, yes, I'm facing this challenge, but it's not the end. It's an opportunity to sit with that challenge and say, what is it communicating to me in this moment? What does it need? And then attending to that. And so that's a piece, but I don't see it as being like the stopping point for folks. For folks that are not in our community, what I see could be an experience is really all of these things being like, what? This is what y'all have been experiencing. This is like a real thing. And it's like, yeah, this is our real life, right? And so there can be this moment of like, also of awakening of, I didn't know all of this was happening. And for folks, I would encourage, take your time with that as well. Take your time with that exploration of, yes, this is real, this is happening, this has been happening, it's not new, this is our experience. And then really take the time to, like, the book is really an opportunity to listen to, like, I really am pouring my voice and my heart out. And so it's an opportunity to listen and say, okay, as I'm reading this page or as I'm reading through this thing, what's coming up in my body? What's coming up for me? What do I feel inclined to do? And that in itself is information to explore about, where you are in your development and what support you might need as you continue to support Black women and femmes for our healing and liberation as well, too.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And speaking of support, I think that one of the things that makes your book such an amazing piece of work is that you are speaking to the specific population, but it stands out because there aren't a lot of books out there that address this particular issue, right? And so I'm wondering if you could talk to us about, why there isn't that support for Black women with eating disorders. Why is there this underrepresentation regarding Black women who struggle with this issue?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, but what I'll focus on is some of the main ones. And that is that when we have this image of eating disorders, you and I talk on side conversations outside of this, experience and say, we don't envision ourselves with that word eating disorder. We see mostly thin, able bodied white women being represented in this diagnosis. And so if that's the representation that we're seeing, it's often that we're like, no, that's not me. And I also will name that when we are engaging in eating disordered behaviors, and for example, we visit our doctor and we may have limited our food intake, or we may be experiencing and being disconnected from our body, we're often praised for that. It's like, oh, you haven't ate in 3 days, great, that's good for you, right? And so there's also this praise for neglecting our bodies and not listening to ourselves and our communities, because there's already this preconception that the Black body is disorderly, that the Black body is deviant. And this has been embedded into the mentality throughout, our country. And so, this is just a part of the socialization that we have to wake up to and recognize the biases that we hold within our bodies. And because of that, these are the reasons why oftentimes we're encouraged within our behaviors. And then again, because we don't have the representation, we don't have the image or language to describe what we're going through. And I do want to name and say, in mental health therapy, we commonly discuss this as eating disorders. But folks will notice as you read my book, and I'm very clear that I actually redefine it as eating imbalance. I don't like the word disorder necessarily because it feels pathologizing. And it also, for a lot of people, just doesn't resonate. And so I changed the word to imbalance because I feel that imbalance gives us flexibility. It tells us that it's not a fixed state. It's something that we just are in out of balance with. And so it's a question of, how do I create more balance in this area of my life? Right? It's not that I'm disordered, that I'm bad, that there's nothing else I can do for myself. It's solely, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to feel more whole? And that's this a part of this journey. That's a hope for this book, is that you feel more whole by the end of this story. And so that is a part of it for me, is getting into that aspect of things. And so yes, we are not represented. Yes, we do experience, being praised for eating imbalances. And also, I want folks to know that we can create more balance by returning back to the practices that are supportive in our community, returning back to our ancestral practices, going back to things that we've been doing to support our eating, our bodies, our connection to self. That those things are possible for us, but we have to remember it. It's not lost. We just have to remember it and come back to it. And that's another piece of what this book is about, is remembering the things that have always been inside of us, but that we've been conditioned to forget.
Yes, 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 yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, all of that. And I love the reframe there, removing the word disorder, and replacing it with imbalance, right? It's just more of a personable approach and more compassionate. Like we're talking about human lives, right?
Yeah.
So definitely can appreciate that. So here we are. So this is the question of the hour as we're wrapping up this portion of our conversation. I want to know if, for all of the people who are avid readers and they love to go into bookstores, libraries, if they walk in and they're looking for a book, particularly around this topic, and they see tons of books, as I mentioned from the beginning, um, what do you want the audience currently to know about your book that would make them select your book over others that they may see in the store or the library?
Yes, and I totally resonate with that experience of like being in a bookstore and like looking around and being like, both of these books look good, but why should I buy this book? So I get it, right? And for me, what really like it really stands out in regards to why someone should buy this book is that it's accessible. Something that really just was important to me, especially as someone who's worked in social justice for years, and also has many marginalized identities, is that I wanted to make something that would be accessible to everyone. It doesn't matter, that you couldn't afford therapy. It doesn't matter that you couldn't, get your sound bowl healing or attend a yoga class or get a massage. What I wanted folks to do is be able to pick up this book and as they read it, know that you're getting all of that in one place. Because I was super intentional about, I want to like put my voice in here to the point where you're working with me, like a one-on-one session almost. Like we're working together through this book. You're getting your therapy through this book. You can always come back to it, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I have to go back and pay for another session. Like once you get the book, it is yours. And so it's a part of like getting that really deep, intensive therapy. Of course, I don't say my book is a substitute for therapy. For all my therapists out there, this is not a substitute. This is an addition to what folks already have going on top of other therapy tools as well. And I will say the depth of this book offers that kind of healing. And so that's why I feel that folks should pick it up. And also knowing that, again, it meets you where you are. And so if you like start reading a chapter and you're like, I'm not really feeling this, you can go to another chapter and say, let me give this one a try. And maybe that's not, that doesn't work for you. And you're like, I'm just going to try to journal prompt today. Like you can really come in wherever you want to come into the book, and know that you can always come back to it when you need to as well.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I appreciate, especially as a therapist of many years, I appreciate that you specify that this is not a replacement for
Mm,
therapy. However, I will say that we also know that every therapy isn't accessible to everyone. Everyone doesn't have access to therapy, right? That's a challenge for a lot of people, particularly in our community. So sometimes, we do have to grab like self-help books and material, that's cheaper that we can kind of delve through ourselves. So, again, even though it may not be a therapy replacement, it's certainly a good place to start if you have to, and it's also a good supplement if you are already in therapy, then it complements it very nicely. So, no,
absolutely.
I appreciate you answering my questions. I want to open up the floor to those who are attending. We're going to take questions now from you, and you can have your own conversation with Alishia. And I do before we throw those questions out there, and I'll give you guys some time to think about that and throw some questions in the chat. I do want to just set some boundaries. I know that we have, there's a statement that's there saying that, we don't tolerate harassment of any form. So I just want to say overall, like, we just want to set some boundaries, make sure that we're showing love and that we're respectful as we're asking questions here. So we always want to be mindful of that. We're all human and we need to treat each other as such. So, any questions that you all have? I see Marcia made or Marcia. I'm not sure which way she pronounces her name, but she was given some love earlier. I'm not sure at what point she was what she was responding to. But we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, any questions? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. All right. So we have a question that just came up from Jasmine Rogers. So, what was your experience in writing on such a personal topic? Very good question.
Super good question. So, writing this book really required for me to not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I say that because at the time I was writing this book, I was practicing a mental health therapist. So, I'm also a mental health therapist as well. And I was seeing clients, and, honestly, I had been in the field for a while. So, I knew that some of the ways of practicing, such as like seeing lots of clients like in one day just did not work for my nervous system. I knew that seeing like having to hospitalize clients but all day long, which is what I did when I first came out of grad school, did not work for me. And so by the time I was in the process of writing this book, I already had like skills such as waking up and doing a meditation, or doing my yoga in the morning, and then seeing clients and resetting between sessions. Like I already had a lot of those skills to really honor me as a therapist and like what I needed from my own nervous system. But what I also was noticing is that while I had a beautiful caseload of people, and it wasn't, I was taking on still a lot. I was giving out a lot. I still wasn't in an energy of like receivership. And it was almost like my body was constantly like exerting and creating and giving, but I didn't have a balance around what I was receiving. So, what I had to do was make a decision to leave therapy, to take a break from being a therapist. And so that was a huge part of my transition with writing this book, was taking a break, because that's my career, that's my passion, that's everything, right? I worked so hard to get there. And so but I had to make the decision, because for me, writing this book meant that I had to take the time to like invest everything that I was invested in my clients back into myself. And so that looked like for me getting into my own somatic therapy. That looked like for me exploring family trauma. That looked like for me having tough conversations with my family that they may have not been prepared to have, and honoring their boundaries, but working through and saying it's important for me to share this story because one day this story is going to touch the ears and the hearts of other people. And it's important for me to be able to share these things in a responsible and respectful way, of course, but also in a way that is healing. And so having those conversations, it was lots of nights like writing different things, writing different drafts, and being like, does that really feel true? So then going back and listening to my own body around, what does this look like for me? And even connecting to self and saying, okay, like I'm talking about these really tough topics, for example, of colorism or texturism or featureism. How am I upholding those systems within myself? And then what do I need to do to unpack that for me and replace that with something different? So everything that I've written in this book are journeys that I've been through in the process of writing, so that it would come across not only as just me just writing some words down and being like, yep, this is what we need, but also literally taking that journey so that it was authentic, so that I can truly talk about it from the heart and not just from this like heady level of like, yep, these are the issues we have in our community, but really like I was in it, I was in this work.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why it turned out so amazing because you're so connected to it, right? I think anytime we have personal experiences and we're putting that on paper or, we're verbalizing that, it is very authentic and it's very genuine. And I think people always appreciate that. Um,
Absolutely.
so Elise has a question. She says, do you have some go-to resources for those that might not have access to traditional therapy?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a proponent of therapy. I'm a therapist, so I'm a proponent of therapy, and I will name and say we have to also talk about the limitations. We have to name that when we talk about Western mental health therapy, that it is founded in white supremacy and patriarchy. And that it has historically harmed marginalized communities. That is not something that I am secretive about. I am very honest about that. And because that has been the origin, it is baked into the mental health system and into the field. And so, what I tell folks is that that's not to discourage you. You have beautiful therapists, very competent, wise therapists like Dr. Hall, who is amazing, that I've known for years. You have people like Dr. Hall, you have other people as well. And also, a part of us returning and reclaiming our bodies is recognizing that before Western mental health existed, we were also healing in our communities. We were healing in village. And so going back to things such as what I like to say is what we now know as sound bowl healing. Sound bowl healing has been a thing for a long time. We've just now popularized it through like this Western lens. But going back to things like sound bowl healing, which is super transformational for the body, yoga, if that's accessible for you, moving your body in ways that feel good to you. It doesn't have to be specific. You don't have to have a like premium gym membership, but it's more so of like what feels good to my body. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's being in the sun, utilizing nature. Other things that I think about for me that were helpful was I engaged in acupuncture. I've done everything from like spiritual work, connecting back to spirit and like my ancestors was super big for me, because it reminded me that I'm not just here, by accident, but that I come from a lineage of people who have been doing this work. And so even seeking guidance through their stories, through their experiences has been helpful for me. Other things that were really helpful were like going out in water. Like I spent a lot of times in water and a lot of time in water, whether it was a pool or doing ecotherapy, which is like kind of like getting in a salt bath and like having that like float tank experience. That was really cool. So for me, I would say this: identify what things make you feel good in your body, and then from there, how do you get more of those things in a way that's accessible to you? Because there was times where I didn't have as much access. There were times where I had to just buy some magnesium cream on Amazon and was like, "Yep, this time I'm relaxing my muscles today," right? So it's figuring out, what do you have access to, and knowing like no, it's no bad way to take care of your body. It's solely listening and taking care of your body.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right. So I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So there are a number of ways, and okay, yeah, we'll get to Elise's question, other question in just a moment. So, there are a number of ways in which we can educate people and we can, disperse information, if you will, right? So we're trying to get information out and to help others so that they know how to handle these personal experiences that they're having. What made you choose a book specifically to, for you to write a book? Because you could be on a speaking tour right now. You could be focused on a podcast. Like there's so many other methods of, getting this information out that you could have chosen. Why a book?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So for me, I'll just say like I feel like it was always a part of my purpose, and I'll talk a little bit about why. So since I've been a little girl, I've always been like had a pencil in my hand. It didn't matter. I was 4, 5, 5. I always had a pencil in my hand and I was writing something. My mom told me, she was like, "You were like speaking at like 2 or 3," which was really weird, like so I've always had this like level of like love for language, love for words, like putting things down. I remember being maybe 10 years old and like writing in my diary these like long stories about like who knows, right? Romance, like life. Like I would also spend hours in the library. Like when I was younger, my mom would be like, okay, I'm going to work. So like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I want to go to the library. Just like leave me there for hours and I'm just going to read, so I've always had this like love for books, this love for writing, expressing myself in that way. I typically am someone like, even in my college classes, my professors were always like, you're so quiet, like you never talk. And they were like, but when you do talk, you say like the things that are really important. And it's like, I'm observant. I take in all the information, I take in the energies, and then I'm like, okay, I think I got it now, right? So for me, writing a book kind of just came across as like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It wasn't like a second thought. It was like, of course, that's what I'll be doing, right? And so I've already written a book. I've actually published a collection of poetry back in 2018 while I was finishing up grad school. And so it's just like, this has always been a part of who I am. And so that's why it was this modality, is that writing really comes to me really easily. And it's something that I actually really love.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. And I love that you know, share that it seems like writing is such a powerful tool for you, right? Like that's how you're able to express yourself. Um, and I think that you speak to something that I would say is also a part of the Black experience. Oftentimes in our culture, we are taught that if you say something, it better be meaningful, right? So,
Hmm.
you know, I've had people say to me that sometimes Black people in general have this like quiet, but like powerful silence, right? Like there's like this power in our silence. And then when we finally do speak or ask a question, it's like you, it better mean something. Like don't just talk to
Hmm.
talk, right? You know. So
Absolutely that.
I think that you definitely embody that. So another question from Elise. So Elise says, "What did you learn in 2020 about taking care of your body that can apply to today?" Oh, well, we know what happened in 2020, so that's
We
a
do.
good one.
That is a good one. So in 2020, I'm bringing myself back to those moments. I was working in a pretty oppressive work environment at that time. And it was getting to the point where like showing up to work was so traumatic for me. Like I would be in my car, like before work crying and honestly praying that I would just have a good day. Um, because on top of the oppression I was experiencing from my bosses and just the environment, I was also just seeing clients that were in such high crisis situations, especially navigating 2020, whether it was COVID or police brutality or racial injustice. There was just so many things that were happening. And so I was holding a lot. And I was noticing that I was consistently sick, that my body was consistently in inflammation, and that I just wasn't myself. Like I just wasn't like feeling good. My energy was not good. And so I had to make a decision. I didn't have like any information as to how to start a business or anything like that. That's not something we're taught in like grad school for mental health therapy. But I knew I had to do something different. And so in April 2020, I decided, one, that I would leave that environment. I didn't have a backup, but I knew that I needed to do something. And I knew that I had the, fortitude to make something different. And so I opened my business. I did all the research. I figured out how to open a business, what I needed to, have in order to practice mental health therapy. I was talking to some friends and community of like, can we do a couple like workshops just to bring in like $30 here, $40 here, just to supplement some income. And so it was really a little bit, but I knew like I can make this work. And so that was the energy that I was in 2020. And then over the summer, a good friend of mine, unfortunately, after the murder of George Floyd, decided to really speak out and hold the field accountable, the mental health and eating disorders field accountable for their lack of responsiveness to what was happening to Black people, not just through that moment, but historically as well. Whether we were being underpaid or the way, even for me, I was pushed out of my job. Yes, I chose to leave, but there were also actions of push out that occurred that typically do happen to Black women in mostly white workplaces. And so we were really calling some of those things out and requesting and honestly demanding accountability. And so what I noticed is that through the movement of Amplify Melanated Voices, which was a global movement created by my colleague and I in 2020, there was an influx of attention of people wanting to support, of people saying, I want to donate to Black Lives Matter, or I want to change my company's policies and my company culture. And so there was a lot of change that happened during that time. And also we received the negative implications of that, which were like, I've received death threats. I received people, saying very inappropriate things to me in my DMs, or, sharing my address, online. And so for me during that time, it was a space of like finally having my voice heard, wanting to get out and organize in the streets for protest, wanting to obviously also protect myself as a new business owner as well. And, knowing like if my picture gets out there, that could affect, my business. But then also, recognizing the fear of, being in a space where people are threatening your lives for speaking out for your humanity, right? So it was a very scary time. And what I will notice is that in some ways, I took the systems of oppression, such as overworking, such as neglecting my needs, such as overgiving, and applied those to my new business and my new life that I was living. And I recognized like I'm still not free. Like I took those same systems and applied them here, and I'm still experiencing the same things. And so by the time I would say the end of 2021 came around, I said, this is not sustainable. I have to make a change. Like I need to prioritize my care. I need to prioritize my rest. I need to prioritize taking care of my body. And so that led me into this deeper exploration of what is somatic therapy, right? Like how do I like support myself through these trainings? How do I wake up and create a practice that honors my body? How do I get better sleep, right? Like that was something me and my therapist talked about a lot. It's like, you're not sleeping. And I'm like, I'm going through trauma. And it's like, yes, and also, right? So like getting really, really like clear about what are the things I need in order to sustain myself and thrive, because I don't desire, for the systems to, kill me, right? Or for my body to suffer. And so that was a big part of what shifted for me in 2020 was this immediate action to organize and to be in the energy of like reactionary anger and rage, rightfully so, but also this kind of like turn of time and recognizing that that's great, but I also have to take care of myself as I'm organizing, as I'm moving, as I'm demanding liberation. Like I have to be in practice of that for myself, because if I'm saying I want these things, but I'm not practicing it for myself, then nobody is free, because I'm not being an agent for change if I can't even shift those systems for myself within me.
Yes. And I have, I have a follow-up question because you're speaking about the negativity that you sometimes experience because of the type of topic that you're discussing and you're trying to educate people about. Obviously, in this, political climate, just the climate of our country in general, people aren't as welcoming and warm to some of the topics that you discuss. So
Yeah.
how do you deal with all of the negativity, or how would you encourage other people to deal with negativity? Because I think that one of the triggers for the eating imbalance is, as you call it, is negativity. It is stress, right? It's triggers that we have. So how can people deal with negativity? And that may be just as important now, maybe more than ever, particularly in our country. So, how would you say people can deal with that?
Yeah. Something that really came up for me was recognizing that a lot of times what people are in, and this is like coming from my therapy experience as well, is that we oftentimes personalize a lot of the things that people are offering us, the negativity, and we personalize it, and then we give permission for the energy to enter our field, whether we cognizantly want to or not. When we choose to like harbor on it and take it in, like we are choosing to permit that energy into our space. And what I've really been intentional about over the years is recognizing that when people are showing up in these ways, in negative ways, and, to get more specific, if people are making negative comments about our bodies, that is not a reflection of your body. That is a reflection of how they feel about their body, that they feel the need to project outward. There's something within them that they're not comfortable with, and they want you to feel that same sense of discomfort. And maybe it's not intentional, but that is their stuff, right? And so a lot of what I really told myself over the years and recognize is like, that's their stuff, right? Like that's them. Then that's not to say never take accountability and like never look inward, because I will take a pause and say, let me explore, is there validity to what's being offered, right? Like, is there something that's creating a reaction within me that I also need to explore and say, what stuff is kind of getting triggered within me, right? But it's also recognizing too, like, I don't have to accept that. It's setting that boundary and saying, I don't have to take that in. And so this perspective or this response is more to say, I'm not saying you're immune from negativity. I'm not having this like what is it called? Positive, um, positive, it's like when you bypass positive bypassing. I'm not having this positive
Yes.
bypassing and
Yeah.
saying, yep, solely just like taking positive information. I acknowledge we are human beings being impacted by other human beings. And also we get to explore how those things land in our body, and then if we want to accept them as truth or not. And so that's how I would answer that. Thank you. Toxic
Mm-hmm.
positivity. Thank you for that. Yes.
Very good. Thank you for that. So we have a couple of questions, a couple more questions that are
Mm-hmm.
here. So Princess Stalling says, "Hey everyone, I've suffered from eating imbalance slash disorder for a while. I work in an aesthetic medical office and I find it difficult to practice healthy habits there. I see my therapist and we've been working on it. But I find at work it's harder to ground myself. Do you have any advice on triggers in the corporate work environment?" Wow,
Mm.
loaded but great question. Yeah,
Super great question. Absolutely that.
yeah.
So, one of the things I had to recognize about my work environment is that what I was experiencing was real. Because a lot of times we can be gaslit into feeling like that the everyday experiences we are having are not real, that we're making it up. So, really validating for you that what you're experiencing is real. And a lot of it is systemic. So, I know sometimes we focus on the person that is embodying the system, but recognizing that it is a part of the system as well. And once I really came to truth around what was happening for me, I will name, as I've already stated earlier, I just had to leave. In my experience, I had to leave. But I also recognize everyone doesn't have the privilege to just leave, or it might not just be the right time for that. Like it does take a lot of intentional planning to leave. And so, what I'd encourage you to do is figure out, okay, what are the things as this, we'll start with the triggers. So as this experience is happening to me, what's happening inside of my body? So for example, I remember work meetings where like my hands would be getting sweaty, I would be feeling really shaky, my heart would be beating really fast, like when I would feel like almost like, oh my god, I hope no one calls on me because my voice is super shaky because I'm dysregulated. So identifying like when these things happen to you, what is happening inside of your body? What does your body need? And so what I recognize for me is that when my body gets kind of overheated like that, I need it to kind of like shift. And so I need to have like a water near me so that I could like drink some water, or something cold near me so that I could like re-regulate my body temperature. Or maybe just being like, I need to go to the bathroom real quick, and like going to the bathroom and taking a couple moments of breaths, so that your body can re-regulate itself. And so that's what I would encourage first, is identifying how do triggers show up in your body, and then what are they communicating to you? What exactly do they need in that moment? The other thing is encouraging you and saying, in the small micro moments, how can you check in with your body around what, again, it goes back to what does it need, but checking in micro moments. So let's say, for example, you are in your office and you have like 2 minutes. It can be a 2-minute breathing activity of like, okay, I'm coming back to myself, I'm doing some breathing. Now that I've checked in, let me check in about my hunger. Do I feel hungry in this moment? And if so, where is that hunger in my body? Sometimes it's in your stomach, sometimes it could be somewhere else in your body. And then slowing down the process and saying, is it food? Is it something else that I need in this moment? And if it is food, perhaps in the mornings, like prepping some snacks to throw into your bag, just to be like, okay, I'll just eat, this for a snack, just so I can take care of my body. And afterward, I have a plan to like leave and go to, my favorite restaurant and like get this food, right? But noticing and saying like, what supports my body, like really prioritizing yourself. And I'm so emphasizing that in this moment, because these systems don't think that way. These systems function by you being disconnected from yourself. So the best thing you can do for yourself is reconnect and say, I'm taking care of myself. It doesn't matter if I'm in this workplace or another workplace. I have to prioritize myself in this moment. So hopefully that is helpful, but that's where I would say to start. And again, if you need to make a plan, like being very strategic, right? But making a plan also to look for something that better suits you, is more aligned with where you are and more, deserving of what you have to offer to a space.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's wonderful that you mention, I don't want to say give permission, right? But you mentioned this plan, this strategy for being able to take a moment while you're in the work environment. I think that that is a strategy that people underestimate, right? Or they just don't think about it. the importance of being able to do that. Like, during the workday, we are always stepping out at least to go to the restroom or, going to lunch, etc. So there's always going to be that moment where you can take a couple of minutes. And I think people will be surprised at how impactful that can be on your body and your mental health.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
very good, very good. So one last question from Gabrielle. So she says, "Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. For folks that may not know the signs of eating disorder or imbalance, what are ways that we can identify that? Sometimes representations of unhealthy eating, unattainable body image, etc., in the media are so normalized that it can be difficult to identify when there's an issue." Good question.
It is a really good question. So what I'll say is this: when we think about the words eating disorder, especially when we look at it from a mental health perspective, we have what we call diagnostic criterias. So these criterias are listed in this book called the Diagnostical Statistical Manual. And they basically give us criteria for example, if you have anorexia nervosa, okay, you have this, so here are all the symptoms that you have. Here, here's the duration of how those symptoms need to be happening, how long they need to be happening, also how long they've been happening over your lifespan. And so there's this very specific prescription to how we would diagnose this condition, and that's valid. And so one of the things I would say, for example, is that Google, right? We are so blessed now to have access to these things. They're not just in the book. Go through and Google, what are these diagnostic criterias? What do they look like? How long are they? Not to diagnose yourself, but just to have some information for education, right? So that's my first thing I would say. But the second part that I really emphasize even in the book is that noticing, okay, my relationship with food or my body, is it a relationship that I feel satisfied with? Does it cause me distress? That's the question that you don't need a diagnostic manual to identify. You can notice as you're sitting down for lunch, am I having distress about what I'm eating? Am I thinking it's healthy or unhealthy? Am I like struggling, for example, if I'm ordering food on Uber Eats, am I like, how many calories does this have? Or I don't know if I can eat this because, it would be considered a bad food. Or even maybe it's beyond that. Maybe you're someone facing food insecurity and you're like, I just can't afford, what, like, I don't have the money for this. These are all areas that could be, touched upon. And so, one, identifying, okay, what does this look like for me? Right? And does it cause me distress? And then how is it causing me distress? Like, as I'm sitting down with my food, for example, am I noticing that I'm more able to eat when I'm like on my computer doing other things? So it's like more common that I'm distracted in eating, which causes me maybe to eat more than what I would normally eat. And then I feel uncomfortable. Like, those are things we got to slow down and start paying attention to. And when you start noticing that's habitual, so that's happening over time, over time, over time, that's when I would say, okay, we're experiencing distress over time, over time, over time. It's having impact. So that's a moment for you to maybe write some of that stuff down and identify it, and then take it to a therapist and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Could you work with me around this? Could you tell me a little more about what's happening in my body? And so I tell people always, you are the expert of your body. You hold everything that you need within you. It's just really slowing down and identifying what's happening for me right now, and then knowing where to get the support that you need. So that's what I would say in regards to that. And same for body image. I do see that part of it as well. The body image as well. Are you noticing, for example, you're buying your shirts too small? And it's like, let's explore that. Why am I buying all of my clothes too small? Is there like this idea that I'm trying to lose weight and that one day magically I'll be able to fit into this clothes, like putting this pressure on my body to shift and change versus just buying the clothes that fit my body and this is that moment? Like, those are the things that we can explore within ourselves and then seek out the support for. And so I always tell folks, like, meeting yourself where you are is really accessible. It's just that we've been conditioned not to do that. And that's why I wanted to bring us back into that conversation with our bodies through this book.
Yes, yes, certainly, certainly, certainly. Well, we have reached the part of our program where the questions we have wrapped up. Everybody saying thank you. Princess Stalling said that was
Of
very
course.
helpful. Gabrielle says thank you. I want to say thank you just for, taking time to share your knowledge with everyone. Such an important topic, and somebody has to do the work, right? And you're a very key soldier on the ground, like fighting for everybody making sure they have this information, making sure people are healthier. So I think it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing. And yes, without further ado, if you, I don't know if you have any other last words that you wanted to say before we turn it back over to Stacia.
Absolutely. I just want to say one, thank you everyone for being here this evening and sharing this space with us. This really means a lot. When I finished writing this book, everybody asked me like, "So what do you want this book to be? Like, what do you want it to do?" And I was like, "I just want this book to be out in the world and make a huge impact and allow for people to leave this book different from the way they entered this book." And so, what my hope for everyone here who buys the book, who considers the book, is that when you start this book that you will end in a way that helps you feel more connected and whole within yourself. And that's my impact. That's what I want to offer to the world through this work. And then again, I just want to say thank you, Mahogany, Dr. Hall, for being a beautiful conversation partner in this space. Thank you to Charis Books for hosting us. Thank you to my team over at Dow Publishing. I just appreciate everyone for being a part of this journey and process. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what this book will become out in the world. I've done the work, and so I've released it and said it's going to do what it's going to do at this point. So yeah, thank y'all.
It's going to be great. Go cop the book. Go get it. Go get it, folks. All right. So now we're going to turn it back over to Stacia.
Okay, I'm back. Thank y'all so much. That was an incredible discussion and so important. And I also wanted to say thank you to our audience for asking such insightful questions. I think you really helped boost this conversation as well. But that is all for us tonight. I did just want to quickly remind everyone that if you want to purchase Reclaiming the Black Body, you can do so at the link right below us, that teal link. That's going to direct you to our website. And as a reminder, purchasing from Charis helps us keep putting on events like this. You directly support our mission and allow us to keep hosting authors and having important conversations like this. I know everyone walked away with some knowledge and some important thoughts to chew on, but this is it for us for tonight. I want to wish everyone a good evening and a good rest of your week. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.